timer up at the podium.
Can we place it right here?
It's up there.
Do you want me to place it?
Wherever you would like to have it, it needs to be set at 25. Okay, so
I think it's already running.
no, give it to me, then I'll reset it for you.
Oh, thank you very much. It looks so confusing.
I know, I'm very technologically challenged, but that's okay. I just look that way. Okay, all you have to do when we're ready to go is you, oh, and it blanks. Yeah, it's good, and you hit start, and
Thank
it'll
you.
go. All right.
Perfect.
So as we say in my profession, let's go on the record. My name is Ruth Kraft. As Professor White told you, I'm the Uber judge for this room. This is my 16th year of judging the competition. I'm going to introduce my colleagues in a couple of seconds. Let me first say that in this part of the competition, you are going to take on a fictitious business identity and assign a similar fictional identity to us as the judges at the beginning of your presentation. So please let us know who you are and let us know who we are before you get started. You're going to have 25 minutes. There is a little bit of a cushion after the 25 minutes if you run over, since you're a large team, to describe the legal, the financial, and the ethical dimensions of the problem, and then to recommend a solution that passes muster on all three fronts. You're actually going to be uninterrupted for the 25 minutes, and if you know me, you know that if you were in a real courtroom before me, I'd be interrupting you probably after 2 minutes. So you're getting a big pass here. After we finish, then we're going to begin asking you questions, and the Q&A period can take up to 20 minutes. We'll all ask you questions. During that, we will all stay in character, and you will stay in character. After that period, we're going to break our aliases, if you will, and we're going to give you feedback on the presentation. I want to remind you that the ethical elements of the presentation are the most important, because this is a business ethics competition, not a finance or a business law competition. Also, please keep in mind that using technical, philosophical terminology, referring to Socrates, Jesus, Allah, or anybody else, is a serious weakness. You will be dinged severely on points for doing that. You need to present in clear-cut terms. Also, and I'm glad to see I don't see notes out here. You can have notes. Please do not read from notes or from the PowerPoints. Okay? And everyone is going to have a speaking role here today, correct?
That's right.
Good. All right, I think we are ready to get started. Let me just set my...
May I ask a question? Is it 25 minutes or 30 minutes?
It's technically 25 with a 5-minute buffer.
Okay.
And the reason we do it that way is because if we told you 30 and they get cut off mid-sentence, we want to give them the ability to complete, but we do not go beyond 30 in any case. Okay? So if you can hit that button, I will do the
How can I get it
same.
again to...
Here, give it to me. I'll do
Okay.
both of them at once.
Thank you.
So we can synchronize.
Perfect.
Okay. If you know what. Okay. We're good.
Perfect, thank you. All right, today you're going to be the board of directors of Wells Fargo, and we are a MBI consulting, and we're going to be advising the board of directors of Wells Fargo. So, good morning, board of directors of Wells Fargo. Thank you for being here with us today. On behalf of MBI Consulting, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to work with your company on improving your business. My name is Santiago Avila, research consultant at MBI Consulting.
My name is Ms. Khan, and I'm a legal consultant.
Good morning, I'm James Lynn, and I'm a financial consultant.
I'm Luis Rosales, and I'm the ethical consultant.
Integrity, it's not a commodity. It's most rare and precious of personal attributes. It's the core of a person's and a company's reputation. Those are words of John Stumpf, CEO of your company. Those words represent and embody what your company is truly about. Your bank is the largest bank in the world by market capitalization at $254.19 billion. As of the first quarter of 2015, your company controls 41% of the market share for mortgage lending in the US, being the largest lender for mortgages in the country. In addition to that, you have been in business for 164 years now, showing that you are a sustainable, profitable, and responsible company. We understand the importance of ethics and values for your company. And for those reasons, we have been working on addressing an issue that has the potential of turning into an internal crisis for your company. You have asked us to come today because of a succession of recurrent events in which Wells Fargo has been accused, sued, or mentioned in the media in regards to predatory lending practices and unrealistic sales quotas. That means targeting minorities and inducing them to take up loans with unfavorable interest rates. In addition to that, opening unauthorized accounts behind the backs of your customers. And that trend of ongoing legal cases is also reflected in the media, where plenty of articles have stricken the pages of newspapers and magazines, portraying a negative image about your company. That trend reflects on the web as well, where a simple search for sales quotas for banking brings up 10 results on the first page. And out of those 10 results, 6 are negative articles about your company. And that bad press and ongoing legal litigations affect each one of the stakeholders of your company, starting with your shareholders, who could be affected if the performance of your company is compromised due to the continually raising lawsuits. Of course, your customers as well, who are the main affected group. Unethical practices by your employees could translate into the loss of investments and savings for many people. And they will also lose the trust in your company. The government, who could strengthen policies and regulations across your industry and make of Wells Fargo a target for future investigations. And lastly, your employees, who could experience unpleasant work environments and potentially face criminal charges. Now, because of this succession of negative events, we would like to invite you, Board of Directors of Wells Fargo, to ask yourselves the following. Should Wells Fargo change their aggressive business practices and policies to eliminate allegations over predatory lending practices and unrealistic sales quotas? Now, as your team of consultants on this matter, we would like to share with you today the only possible answer. Yes, you should. Our goal is to complement your company's effort on resolving this issue by providing a complete portfolio of solutions for both the short and the long run. All of our proposed solutions follow a triple bottom approach: legality, financial attainability, and ethical applicability. We have broken down our solutions into 2 main segments: the short run and the long run. Now let's take a look at each one of them. For the short run, we have 3 suggestions. First, revise and examine your current code of ethics, and specifically how it is being enforced and implemented across your company. And also, invest in ethics training for your employees that will reinforce the values across your organization. Secondly, revise your incentives programs, not only on how many deals have been closed, but also in the customer satisfaction. Secondly, and thirdly, review and compensate those customers who have been affected. Conduct a post-mortem analysis through which you're going to analyze what went wrong and what we can do to prevent it from happening in the future. For the long run, we also suggest 3 things. Number 1, establish relationships with third-party ethics compliance organizations in order to measure how effective your company is on this matter. Secondly, emphasize on transparency and clarity across your organization and in any transaction and interaction with your customers. And lastly, continue to work with those customers in the long run who were affected in the past and helping them achieve their financial goals through the use of your services. Now, I'll pass it over to our team of consultants who will further expand on the dimensions of this issue, but as well of this solution. Ms. Kang.
Thank you for that, Mr. Avila. Over the years, Wells Fargo has faced a recurring trend of lawsuits against predatory lending practices, dating all the way back until 2010. Today, we're going to focus on 2 of the most significant of these. Wells Fargo has been found to have broken 3 laws and regulations: Equal Credit Opportunity Act, Fair Housing Act, and the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act prohibits credit discrimination against borrowers. The Fair Housing Act is intended to protect borrowers and buyers from landlord and seller discrimination, and the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act is intended to make sure that consumers are informed of potential threats and scams. First, in May of 2011, the city of Memphis filed a lawsuit against Wells Fargo, stating that they were steering minorities toward unaffordable loans from 2000 all the way up through 2009. This led to a disproportionately high amount of home foreclosures in predominantly African American neighborhoods, thus violating both the Fair Housing Act and the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act. In the end, Wells Fargo had to settle and pay $432.5 million towards economic development, down payments, and residence. Similarly, in September of 2015, the city of Oakland, California filed a lawsuit against Wells Fargo, accusing them of recklessly leading minorities towards higher loans. When Wells Fargo was put on the spot, they refused to refinance these minorities at the same rate that their white customers received who were eligible for the same credit. This ultimately led to a great amount of home foreclosures, as similar to the other case. This was proven to be in violation of the Fair Housing Act, and Wells Fargo was required to provide compensatory damages to all the affected parties. Wells Fargo is not the only company to have been affected by predatory lending practices. In December of 2011, Bank of America was forced to pay $335 million to the U.S. Justice Department to settle allegations of discriminatory lending practices. Bank of America was accused of leading more than 200,000 minorities to higher credit rates and 10,000 of those minorities to higher subprime mortgage rates. Similarly, JP Morgan was accused of distributing discriminatory mortgage loans in June of 2014 and is being required to fully award compensatory damages to the city of Miami. Now, while both Bank of America and JP Morgan were able to combat this issue, we are recommending a more effective solution of our multi-tiered solution through both the short term and the long term. We believe that by tackling this problem now, Wells Fargo will be able to avoid having to face similar lawsuits and settlements in the future and improve both the reputation and the integrity of the company. By focusing on transparency, we'll be able to ensure that our customers are given full disclosure of our policies and regulations so that they know what they are paying for. In turn, this will lead to improved customer service so that we can improve our relationships with our customers who are investing time with us, and so they are aware of the regulations and are able to understand that we are working towards getting ahead of the regulatory curve. With this in mind, I would like to pass on the argument to our financial consultant, Mr. Lin.
Thank you, Ms. Khan, and good morning, Board of Directors. I'd like to break down the financial dimension of this problem into 6 different categories. First, I'd like to speak to the similar situations just mentioned by Ms. Khan. I'd like to also talk about the past lawsuits and the repercussions of those. I'd like to speak to the vague ethics and compliance budget within your financial records. I'd like to speak to the trend in sales within your company, profitability, and finally how to address the issue and implement the solution. So first, speaking back to several of the lawsuits within other companies similar to yours, Bank of America had to pay out $335 million based on discriminatory lending practices, a huge sum of money for a company like this. In addition, JP Morgan faced a similar suit and is in the process of paying out a similar amount based on similar allegations. And like these companies are similar to yours, this is a potential amount of money that your company could see to pay in the future, and that's something what we're going to avoid. But going back to the history of your company, in 2012, we saw a payment and a settlement of $175 million based on these allegations. And then again in 2013, we saw $17.1 million settlement. And finally, another one in 2013, a $203 million settlement. All of these in similar allegations based on discriminatory lending. And this was a reoccurring issue within the company and something we want to prevent and have no further trend in these type of settlement payments based on discriminatory lending. But further, right now, your company faces a lawsuit with the city of Oakland, as Ms. Khan mentioned earlier. And this has the potential to wreak serious financial hazard for your company, considering they can have to pay out potentially $300 million or more in potential lawsuit payments. And this is what we want to avoid. So speaking into how to address this, we took a look at the financial records in your company. And what we found is a very vague budget for ethics and compliance. In fact, we saw $2.6 billion listed for outside professional services. And And within that, there's several different categories, but nothing in specific listed the amount of money that's going to various aspects. And so although ethics and compliance was listed under that, we wanted to see a specific amount to what's going towards training and how you're particularly implementing ethics and compliance within the company. And so we believe this needs to be more specific within the company. In addition, we took a look at sales within credit cards because many of these minorities are targeted with credit cards they may not be aware of, with different rates that they are not completely sure of. And what we saw is we saw an increased volume of credit card sales. However, the revenues did not fluctuate, showing that there was no substance to the additional credit cards let out to these different customers, and no real profitability within them, causing these customers to struggle while the number of sales and credit cards went up in total. Additionally, we looked at a report from one of the employees within your company who was under the stress of the sales quotas within your company. This directly correlates with the number of sales each day. And he started out at 20 sales, and that was this huge struggle, and there's ethical issues within the employees struggling to meet these quotas. And once it's dropped to 15, he still had that additional stress within the company, and still felt an environment where he could not fully operate in an ethical manner. And this was a trend within the employees at Wells Fargo. So we want to compile this all together and see how this reflected in the revenues of your company over the past several years. And what we saw is, as your company was paying out settlements to combat the allegations based on discriminatory lending, there was a significant decrease in the revenues of around $2 billion. And then after that trend and significant payments of settlements, we saw the sales quotas drop to 15. And after that, the revenues began to climb as there was not as much of a trend in settlement payments. And so this is what we want to continue to see in your company. However, with the current allegations with the city of Oakland, this could potentially hinder that and see a different trend instead of being positive, negative. And to look at this even further, we looked at delinquent loans. And we noticed as the revenues were climbing and your sales quotas had been dropped, the delinquent loans were decreasing, noticing that there was more profitability within the loans within your customers, even though those sales quotas were not as high as before, showing that it would be profitable to reduce the sales quotas within your company. And so finally, in order to address the issue at hand and make sure that you do not have to pay serious legal fines, but rather combat the issue and we get ahead of the curve, we believe an estimated $300 million solution, which would be approximately 3.5% of the revenues of your company and 0.83% of the profits within your company. And that would be to create a clear, transparent ethics and compliance budget. In 2014, Forbes stated that a financial firm such as yourself should have approximately $12 million allocated to ethics and compliance. And as the years have progressed, we believe that the amount should be about $20 million allocated with specific categories dedicated to the training and resources provided to employees. In addition, we believe that your company should partner with a compliance organization that will provide a sense of regulation and help to your company to make sure you're completely ethical. So that could be with the Society of Corporate Ethics and Compliance, which would be approximately $25 million in total to implement that, considering maybe 100,000 customers are under this agreement and have the proper training within this partnership. Additionally, we believe your company should determine reasonable sales quotas, and with these sales quotas provide the employees the means to operate ethically and within a reasonable bound. And then finally, we believe that your company should compensate affected customers ahead of time and notice that the trend with discriminatory lending and address that issue beforehand and compensate $2,500 to each customer that's been affected, which could be potentially up to 100,000 customers. And although this is expensive, this would show your dedication to addressing the issue before the issues come and force your company to make this decision. So as you can see, these solutions address the short-term and long-term solutions of revising the current ethics compliance budget and making that specific, as well as addressing the sales quotas, and also compensating the customers both short-term and long-term to make sure that the ways that they've been affected have been addressed within the company. And then finally, by establishing a third-party ethics and compliance company to partner with to make sure that your company is operating in the most ethical way possible. And now I'd like to pass it on to Mr. Rosales to explain the ethical aspects of this problem.
Thank you, Mr. Lin, and good morning. When addressing the ethical dimensions of this issue, we found three main points which we want to highlight. Firstly, that is that Wells Fargo is imposing unrealistic sales quotas upon its employees, which in turn can cause unnecessary stress and potentially harm the well-being of our employees. Secondly, this is also harming the corporate culture and brand that Wells Fargo claims to have, something that I'll go into depth about later on in my presentation. Also, the banking practices that Wells Fargo has set in place is also harming our employees by giving them unreasonable interest rates and targeting minorities with high interest mortgages. This all adds up to violating the stakeholders' model of ethics, which basically says that companies should adhere to the rights of all parties that are involved with the company while doing business, so from customers to employees alike. So here I want to highlight a testimonial from another previous Wells Fargo employee, Ms. Beth Jacobson, who describes her experience under high sales quotas and it describes how African Americans specifically were targeted when giving such high interest rates mortgages. She also boils down her job description into one phrase: get people approved, showing that Wells Fargo was putting an emphasis on sales and numbers rather than actually looking at which customers qualified for such interest rates and making sure that they had the potential to pay back their loans and protecting the customers, something that was not being done. So our solution addresses these downfalls. If we were to implement our two-tier solution, the compliance with laws and globally accepted business practices, Wells Fargo will come into compliance with these, and also it will improve its image, which it states to have within its ethical code, something that, again, I will boil down soon. So, when addressing the problem, we referred to globally accepted business practices. And to do so, we refer to the Global Business Standards Codex. The Codex, in simple terms, is a compilation of fundamental ethical values that should be implemented by companies to meet basic ethical codes. So the Codex was implemented by 4 Harvard professors, and it just basically boils down all of these fundamental principles into 8 categories. And these are as follows. There's the fiduciary principle, property, reliability, transparency, dignity, fairness, citizenship, and responsiveness principles. Now, when analyzing the issue, we have found that at some point, Wells Fargo was not in compliance with most of these. But however, our solution addresses these downfalls. Due to the lack of time, I will be focusing on the ones that we believe are the most, are affecting Wells Fargo the most, and these are property, reliability, and transparency. So, the property principle, simply put, states that businesses should respect the property of others and those who own it. So, in basic terms, you could say that Wells Fargo customers are being robbed. And why is that? Imagine a customer that goes online to check their banking accounts. And they now see that there are 5 new accounts that have been opened, and there are fees associated with those accounts, which they never approved. And these fees have not been paid because they did not know that they opened these accounts. They never authorized them. And so now Wells Fargo is demanding money from customers that was never authorized. It does not rightfully belong to Wells Fargo. This, in basic terms, could be potentially theft. So, the reliability principle basically states that companies should adhere to the terms and conditions that are placed upon relationships when establishing them with customers. So when a customer comes to Wells Fargo and wants to open an account, they sign terms and conditions saying that I'm going to do business with Wells Fargo, and in terms, Wells Fargo will respect my rights. And something that Wells Fargo is not currently doing because we are going behind customers' backs and opening accounts that they never authorized. Also, Wells Fargo is targeting minorities in terms of high interest rates mortgages and not adhering to the terms and conditions that are placed upon when customers begin a relationship with Wells Fargo. Now, transparency principle is something more obvious and clear-cut, basically being honest and truthful with our customers. Something that we can simply address by opening accounts when they are authorized and not going behind customers' backs and opening accounts that were never approved. So, to recap, this chart states how implementing our solution will address each of these principles. from fiduciary to responsiveness. However, like I mentioned, for the lack of time, I'll focus on these three. When implementing our solution, discontinuing unauthorized accounts will make sure that we are no longer robbing Wells Fargo customers in adhering to the property principle. This in turn will also adhere to a liability principle, because the terms and conditions that are placed upon when beginning a business relationship with customers will now be committed to. And transparency, simply being honest with our customers and not opening accounts that are not authorized. So, to end, I want to touch upon Wells Fargo's brand and culture, because in contrast to the situation that we have just described, Wells Fargo actually has a pretty sound ethical code. When looking at Wells Fargo website, you can find that they have fundamental ethical principles that are very ethically sound. So I want to highlight these 5 central values that Wells Fargo claims to be the cornerstone of any business decision that they make. So these are people as a competitive advantage, ethics, what's right for customers, diversity and inclusion, and leadership. The big ones here obviously being ethics and what's right for customers. I also want to highlight these following points that Wells Fargo emphasizes upon their culture and brand. These are relationships that last a lifetime, a culture of caring, disciplined, responsible lending, risk management with clear accountability, and going the extra mile to do what's right. Something that is obviously not being complied with in the situation that we have just described. And so, to close off, I just want to mention that nowadays customers want to brand themselves with a company that stands for something, a company that's going the extra mile to do what's right. And by implementing our solution, you will not only be in compliance with globally accepted business practices, but also laws. And we believe that Wells Fargo has the potential to be that company that goes the extra mile to do what's right with the ethical code that is already in place within the company's values. And with that, I will pass it on to Mr. Avila to recap.
Thank you, Mr. Rosales. The implementation of our solution, just like any other business decision, has some cost and some benefits to it. And in order to assess what the costs and the benefits of implementing our solution, we came up with a simple list of pros and cons, of benefits and costs that implementing our solution will have to your company. First of all, the reputation and public perception about your company will improve. And hopefully it will reestablish and regain the trust that has been lost by your customers in your company. We would like to remind you that buying a house, for many people, is a lifelong dream. And they want to achieve that dream by working with a company that stands for what is right and that will help them achieve their goals. Secondly, you'll improve the quality of work environment for your employees. And in the long run, that translates into a more productive workforce. You'll also guarantee that your great code of ethics is just being implemented and enforced as it is supposed. In addition to that, you'll improve the overall customer satisfaction with the services that your company provides. As I mentioned, there are some benefits and some costs to implementing our solution. So we also analyzed what the costs of implementation were, and we could not come up with anything else than the explicit cost of implementations that our financial consultant approximated to be $300 million. Now, we've talked about the solution and we have talked about the issue itself. But let us tell you how to successfully implement the solution in order to really address the issue. For the short one, it's pretty simple. If you enhance internal control within your company, you're going to comply with all these or 3 proposed solutions and address the issue in the short run. However, for the long run, we do have some suggestions. When we suggest that you establish relationship with third-party ethics compliance organizations, we suggest that you partner with organizations like the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics that works with some of the biggest corporations in the United States, like Allstate Insurance. And then, when we focus on emphasizing transparency and clarity, we don't suggest that you do it by yourself. We think that you should partner with companies who are experts in this matter, like Siegel and Gale. Siegel and Gale have worked with companies like the Citigroup and even the NBA. In addition to that, they have worked with organizations like the IRS on the development of the 1040 Easy form. So they are experts and pioneers in simplification. And if you partner with them, it's just gonna simplify the process of implementing our solution in the long run. And lastly, to continue to work with the affected customers from the past and helping them achieve their goals, we suggest that you focus on enhancing customer service across your organization. In conclusion, we have provided a portfolio of solutions for both the short and the long run that are both legal, financially attainable, and ethically applicable. These solutions will allow your company to address an issue that has the potential of turning into an internal crisis if you do not address it on time. For those reasons, we would like to invite you, Board of Directors of Wells Fargo, to implement our solutions in order to guarantee the success, sustainability, and prestige of your company in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll set this now for 20 minutes, if you can do that as well. Here, you give it to me, I'll give it for you.
Thank you.
Here you go. Okay, I've got a few questions. I'm going to get started, and I realize, when you do this long enough, you always forget something. I forgot to have my colleagues introduce themselves, so when we get to them, I'm going to ask them to tell you what their backgrounds are. Nisba, when we settled those cases, didn't we get a release that acknowledged that we were admitting to no wrongdoing?
Well, yes, that is the case. However, the fact that this has been a recurring trend and that so many different people and companies have brought up this case, this proves that this is a problem. And even though legally it has been resolved, there should be some reason why this keeps coming up and why we should fight
But
this.
particularly in the legal system, plaintiffs' lawyers are, how shall we say this, they're encouraged to file lawsuits, particularly class actions, because the federal court will pay them over $400 an hour without checking those bills. As long as they get $1 for the client, they get their entire fee. So is it our problem, or is it the problem with the legal system that encourages plaintiffs to bring lawsuits even on relatively weak allegations because it's a profit center for a section of the bar?
That is a very good point. It is a profit center. However, Wells Fargo has been required to pay out millions of dollars in these
Now, my
lawsuits.
question to you is, when you say we were required to pay out, most of those cases that were put up were settlements. I mean, we agreed to that. As a board, we voted to approve those settlements. Didn't we do that because it was cheaper than litigating issues?
Sure, thank you for bringing that up. And we looked really into this part of the issue and the many lawsuits that came up. And we asked ourselves if maybe this issue is not just the cost of doing business. And here's how we analyzed it. We know that companies like Google, Apple, Ford get sued every day. That's part of doing business, especially when you have a legal system that might encourage for litigations to come up and for lawyers to file lawsuits and for customers to complain. However, I can assure you one thing, and it's that Google, Apple, and many other companies don't get sued during 5 years over the same claims and litigation. They address the issues when they see that there are recurrent problems that could potentially really turn into bigger issues. And through the settlements, you can have one settlement, but if this becomes a recurrent trend, you're paying settlements of 175 million, of potential 300 million, and that adds up.
Okay, I have a question for James also. When you put up the graphs and you were making the point of the sales quotas, and that when the quota went down, it looked like the costs went down as well. There was a correlation in there to the recession and the recovery from the recession.
Well,
Did you take that into account at all?
yeah, we took into several things to account but what we did realize is that it correlated regardless. And there's fluctuations within the market for various reasons, whether it's a recession or whatnot. But overall, we saw the revenues increasing after the significant trend in settlements were paid out, as well as a decrease in the quotas. So,
I'm sorry, but it's a short time frame that we're looking at there, right?
it was a relatively short time frame of several years.
Do we anticipate that as holding up historically? Do we have any basis for that?
Well, in the past trends, things have fluctuated greatly, particularly because of the recession. But what we do see is we see an upward trend, and we want to address that upward trend and make sure that continues instead of receiving several more settlements. Because as we saw in the past, when your company was paying out numerous trend in settlements for issues relating to discriminatory lending, there was a decrease in the revenues. And we saw that since that correlated so greatly, that's something we want to avoid in the future.
Now, you mentioned also the $2,500 per customer. You estimated 100,000 customers,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have two questions for you. How did you come up with the $2,500 number?
So the lawsuit between Oakland and Wells Fargo, their estimate is that approximately $2,500 to each customer. And so we're estimating
Was
$100,000.
that their demand, or did they have did they quantify that based on reviewing banking records, that was their actual loss?
That was basically what they quantified, but it's still in process. So that's what they have estimated so far, and so that's what we're basing it on.
Okay. Now, as a lawyer, I happen to know that the Ninth Circuit, which includes California, is the outlier of the United States. In other words, you see more extreme lawsuits coming from out there. You see efforts to change social policy using the courts as the mechanism, as opposed to legislation. I don't recall any of you making any statements in terms of the ethics consultants working in conjunction with the Senate or the House of Representatives to change the existing regulation in the industry. Is there a reason for that?
Well, looking particularly to California, we noticed that this lawsuit is in that area, but at the same time, JP Morgan is facing a similar claim with the city of Miami. So we know that this discriminatory lending isn't just faced in one particular location, and we want to make sure that no matter where Wells Fargo is operating, that they're addressing the concerns and the issues of these litigations.
Luis, what is wrong with a bank recognizing that women and minorities have been informationally deficient in terms of the availability of banking services, potential lending, new businesses, small businesses? What is so terrible about looking at the African American community or the immigrant communities in order to help them get a leg up?
Well,
What's wrong with that?
It's the exploitation at the end of the day. Obviously, businesses and banks are set in place with the end goal of having a good bottom line and making profit.
Well, that's what we want to hear.
Absolutely, and we're on the same page when it comes to that. However, there is a gray area here, and that is how far the businesses go to exploit the parties that are associated with it, whether it comes to being customers or employees. Obviously, we do have that goal of having a good bottom line, but businesses have to play a role in society that is more constructive rather than destructive when we want to make profit. So what Wells Fargo has been doing is exploiting the lack of education when it comes from minorities and giving them high interest rates because they don't have that financial literacy. And so that's what we need to address when it comes to the ethical issue.
I have no further questions, gentlemen.
Sure.
And why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jay Eel, and I'm currently doing some consulting work with a company called Better Business Practices, which is an ethics and compliance consulting firm. Formerly, I was Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer for a multinational company located in London. Couple of questions. On the legal side, some of these settlements, you talked strictly about monetary damages. Many times in settlements such as those, there's also a covenant to do away with those discriminatory practices and so forth. Or any of those settlements, do those have those terms which would stop them from continuing to do that in the future? So is it just writing a check, or was it agreeing to do no further discrimination or predatory loans?
Well, I'd like to address that, and it's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. If Wells Fargo had really addressed the issue in the first settlement, there would not exist a recurrent trend of raising lawsuits across the country. And that's why we looked into our solutions and we focused on conducting post-mortem analysis, where you're really going to just not compensate those customers who have been affected, but you're going to also see what went wrong and what we can do differently in order to prevent it from happening in the future.
So is there injunctive relief, which is what Jay's asking you?
Or a consent decree,
or a structure, not only money damages, but a modification of practices?
Is there anything like that?
No, that's our knowledge. That's what we thought.
That means our lawyers did a really good job.
Absolutely. Did you, you touch a little bit on the company's code of conduct and so forth.
Correct.
Did you also look at, whether, what types of policies and procedures the company may have with regard to discrimination and predatory lending and that sort of thing, and or whether there have been any employee calls to the hotline reporting, I'm really under pressure to do something which I think is unethical, and look at your code of conduct, your policies and procedures, how can I act this way when it's contrary to your ethics and compliance,
Yeah.
policies and procedures, your code of conduct and so forth.
I can take that question, and the answer is yes, we did look into that. And as I mentioned, Wells Fargo does have a very ethically sound code, and their procedures when it comes to predatory lending and when it comes to giving mortgages and loans out to customers is ethically sound. There's nothing wrong that we found there. And we did find also that customers did address the hotline, but the issue that was oftentimes brought up is that the process was very complicated. So when employees or customers would call the hotline to address this issue, they would be sent to another person, and the instructions were never clearly given. And that's something that we actually found in a lot of aspects of the companies, even when it comes to financials, things were not as clear cut and easy to read. They were a little bit more complicated, and the answer was not given right away. But to answer your question, yes, we looked into that, and yes, there were complaints and people that tried to address the issue by calling the hotline, but there was no clear solution there. The hotline was not helpful.
But as a member of the board of directors, we normally get reports from our chief ethics and compliance officer on the types of calls to the hotline and the issues that are raised and whether those issues are being addressed.
Yeah, we believe it boils down to internal control. I don't think that if you are supposed to be getting those reports, I don't think the chain of command is properly set up. If you haven't heard about it so far, because it has been an issue and has been reported, and it's even been, like as Mr. Santiago Avila mentioned, it's 6 results come up on Google about that same issue when you look up banking practices. And so it is an issue. And so that's what we need to address, internal control, as we mentioned in our solution.
Also, to expand on that, we believe a big part of the issue is within the sales quotas. Because although there's a huge document for every employee about ethics and compliance and how they should abide, they're put under such high pressure that they can't necessarily obtain those sales quotas while being ethical. And that's where the huge the contradiction comes in, and that's why it can be very difficult for many of these employees.
Have we been sued by our employees for hostile work environment in class actions?
In particular, we didn't know anything of significance, but there were numerous articles and petitions, even outside of Wells Fargo's banks, within employees who were under such high pressures that they wanted to reach the board of directors and other higher management within the company to express their concerns.
To add on to that, in the case of Memphis versus Wells Fargo, the lawsuit verbatim states that the employees have referred to these subprime mortgage loans that the minorities have received as ghetto loans. And of course, ghetto loans has an extremely negative connotation. So if the employees are not comfortable with the rates that they have to provide to their customers, why should the customers be interested?
Hi, my name is Phil Sinopoli. I'm with TE Connectivity. I'm the Associate Ombudsman. I was brought in when they had separated from Tyco International to help set up the ethics and compliance process. So some of my questions are going to be more related to that. Did anybody call the hotline to see what the recorded message was?
We tried. Like I mentioned, it was extremely difficult. We were on hold for, what was that, 20, 15 minutes?
Yeah.
And it was very hard to reach an answer.
In addition to that, we even tried to reach out to employees, but we have to understand that their job is on the line. And it's not easy to talk about these topics, and it's not easy.
And they're not empowered to answer those questions.
Exactly, and that's the answer that we got.
This line you called, was this like a customer service line, or was this a, like I said, ethics hotline?
Sure. No. There is not such thing as the ethics line. We contacted the customer service, and then we instructed the person who was talking with us that we were interested in knowing more about the ethics procedures throughout the company, and if they can just transfer or call to the appropriate department. However, there was not really a clear path for him to do that. And he gave me the phone number for his manager, but then we left a voicemail.
Okay, so
so it starts, it's difficult to get that information at that point because there is no real procedure.
So, and it looked like you did a really good job as far as searching through their website to see their guide to ethical conduct and their policies. So on our website, we don't have a hotline number that was not a customer service number?
No,
That was made
not-
available to the public?
It's
or-
not on the code of conduct either?
Yeah, none, okay.
Not to my knowledge. When we did look through the code of conduct, what we found were the principles and the things that I highlighted.
There was nothing there about speaking up or calling a hotline? Like-
Well, when it comes to-
Sorry.
No, absolutely. That's a great point.
That's-
When it comes to there is a path that's given, but it's when you actually try and go ahead and proceed with it, the actual process, it's where it all gets confused. And so you'll be directed to speaking with, like we mentioned, you'll be directed to speaking with someone else. Well, then we'll answer your call, and then you'll have to leave a message. They'll never get back to you, or you'll be on hold for 15 to 20 minutes, and you'll never get an answer. And so the problem is not that they're not giving you the means to do it. The problem is the actual process itself. At the end of the
Okay,
day.
yeah, and I mean, there's no way you would know if it was a third-party company taking those calls.
Absolutely,
It
correct.
sounded more like it's just internal Wells Fargo.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. To be fair, I'm not saying we're perfect or we're a perfect company. Now, you've got a lot of statistics about, people being targeted and not being, treated right, and literally, as you said, customers are being robbed. What about us Q-tips, us people over 60? Were there any in your research complaints that they felt they were targeted because of their age?
So we did not receive specific complaints from people over 60, but that does not mean that it's not an issue that's happening. We did focus on minorities because that was the prime issue and the issue that's getting the most media attention. However, there's something to be said about being of a certain age and not having the literacy, the financial literacy, first of all, to not know the loans that you're giving, and then not knowing what process to take to go ahead and bring this to attention. And so that's why we believe that it's not something that's being, there's not so much attention around that, but we would not be surprised if that is the
Well,
case.
and that's something you might want to consider for the future.
Absolutely.
If you talk to retirees that do have financial savvy, I'm not retired and my financial savvy is not that good, but where this also ties in to what you're saying about, the sales and the quotas. And it would have been interesting to see if part of that was if you're looking for alleged predatory situations where I want to sell you this 401k because it's going to make you more money than that 401k, and then 3 months later say, oh, but you need to be in this one, and then you get charged fees every time.
Correct.
So, is it were there complaints where people are just getting their money moved around so that more fees could be charged?
In order to address that part, we put two solutions. In the short run, we suggested that we focus on redesigning the compensation for your employees, and not only on how many deals you close, but how satisfied are those customers with the deals closed. And then in the long run, we suggested that you partner with companies like Siegel and Gale on really redesigning how your customers interact with your company to make it a simple and clear interaction. Because we all know that there's a common sense that the fine print is just lethal to some people, and they will not get through it. And we believe that it's not the same to disclose as to inform the customer about what it's being agreed on, the contract, on a mortgage, or on a credit card. And by doing so, we could help the elderly as well. If we simplify the process, it should be a process that is simple enough that every person that interacts with your bank can understand it. And we have seen that some companies in the same industry have done it before. Like I mentioned, Siegel Gale, when they worked with the Citibank on just simplifying their forms and all the business, the interaction and the customer experience when they're interacting with the bank. And there's a lot of work still that still needs to be done in that area. But I think that if your company embraces this opportunity, it could be actually a competitive advantage in the future if you set a precedent throughout in the industry that you're shifting the perspective for people towards the financial industry to a more clear, simple, and honest way of doing business.
You certainly can't put a price on your good name. You can ask Volkswagen about that.
Yeah.
$20 million budget, that's per year to run the entire ethics and compliance program and training from the top down?
That's what we estimated to be generous. And
That's generous.
Yeah. And
20 million.
it could potentially be adjusted from there, but we believe that was a good number to set as a precedent, particularly looking at the previous years, particularly a report in 2014 based on compliance and ethics budgets for financial firms similar to Wells Fargo.
It accounts for the implementation. We expect that number to drop after we have implemented the solution and have already compensated customers and set that relationship up. So it shouldn't be that per year.
How many employees do we have now?
Ooh.
It's like I believe it's around 250,000 or around there.
Well, 20 million is not too bad. But, that's in a perfect world. But thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. No more
Thank you.
questions.
Okay. All right. I've had the pleasure of judging Montgomery on multiple occasions. I still remember the first Montgomery team that appeared. These are community college sophomores, so you're all going to four-year college
Yes,
next year?
and a freshman.
You're a freshman?
Yeah, she's-
Oh, they misidentified you. They made you a sophomore.
She asked
Even
me a
better, you
sophomore.
can come next year. Where are you going next year?
I'm
You're
gonna
staying.
stay at MCU.
University of Maryland.
Well, I'm still. We didn't hear back from schools, but I'll hopefully be going to Georgetown University.
Okay, very nice. And you?
Hopefully Georgetown as well.
Very nice. This is one of the top 5 presentations I've ever seen. Gentlemen, you did good.
Thank you very much.
It really is amazing, and I'm always blown away, particularly because of your youth. In every regard, in the legal, in the financial, your graphics were superb. Your graphics matched the analytics and the clear-cut way in which you were presenting the issues, which ironically, as you just said, about transparency and explaining to our customers exactly what we're trying to do in the banking relationship. I thought you did that in explaining to us what we should take into consideration. It was a very clear and decisive path. And it was also incredibly comprehensive. And I'm usually, Tom has me here for a reason, which is to torture students, because I started life as a law professor and then became a judge, so my whole career has been torturing people. Frankly, I thought it was superb.
Thank you very much. That means a lot.
You did really well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you did a great job as well. I mean, I like the fact that you talked about, reading or reciting what's on the PowerPoint as well. So you knew your subject well and you related it well. We could hear you clearly and you were very distinct in your presentation. So well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, in fact, I just finished 12 days, 12,000 miles doing presentations, so it was really nice to be able to be in the audience. And what I would like to say as far as your presentation styles, you really knew your material. Everybody looked me in the eye, I know that, and you had fun with it.
Absolutely.
And
Enjoy it.
That's and there's people who've been speaking for 50 years, and they just don't. And when you have fun with it, it's you.
Right.
And when you're you, you're going to convince me. And I felt that personally, that I had a great rapport with all of you, and I have a whole page here of questions that I kept scratching off because you kept answering. So, and this is my first time as a judge, so I guess I'm spoiled here to see.
You just got spoiled that this was your first time. This is
Yeah, mine as well.
top of the line, and you're sophomores and freshmen in college, and I've judged the MBAs for years, and people who were in MBA JD programs. This is just superb. In my real life, I was the senior training judge for employment and labor practices for the state of New York before I retired, and I now chair the employment law practice of the group. And I had nothing to ask you basically regarding your employment practices, which is extraordinary. I think your research skills, to me, when you see a presentation that's well done, inevitably it's well researched. When you asked, what happens when you call that hotline? And they had actually called the hotline. I can't tell you how often we hear, oh, that's a really good idea, but we didn't do that. We based it on the books. You actually covered everything. You were brilliantly researched, and And it was almost, as you say, anticipating any question that we could have asked you. So much of this was, we can spend as much time asking questions in many of these as you do presenting. And for me to ask you the few questions that I did is extraordinary. And I honestly, I almost didn't ask any.
Wow.
You know, but I had to like do something here. No, you did brilliantly.
How did you pick this subject?
So we actually all pitched a subject earlier in the year when we were thinking about going on to the IBECC presentation. And as a group, we all decided that Wells Fargo was the one that we were going to go with. But there were various others that were pitched, from Yelp to even Volkswagen.
We're expecting you back next year for Georgetown.
Absolutely.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
1973, and I majored in
Thank you.
Panic.
It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to
You
meet you.
guys are all going to be
Thank you.
successful in your careers in academia. Phenomenal.
Thank you. Great.
Where are your advisors? I'm going to just say congratulations.